All right, guys. So this is Election Day Eve. Tomorrow is Election Day. So November 3rd, for all of you who are 18 years of age or older and registered to vote, you had to go through that extra step. And I do believe you could, I think it is same day now in Michigan, same day registration. So if you haven't registered yet and you think that that's maybe tripping you up, don't hesitate to go to your clerk's office. Today, I'd do it today. I wouldn't try to do it on the same day as the election, but I believe you can. Regardless, go to the clerk's office, your local clerk's office. You can generally just Google who is my clerk for fill in the blank address, and oftentimes they'll take you to a site that will help you identify who your local clerk is. If you live in the city, be your city clerk, obviously, and then whatever township you might live in. If you're in the Calhoun County area, Emmett Township or Sheridan or Marshall, each of those townships will have a township clerk. And if you go to see the clerk, you can certainly get registered at that time. So again, if you're 18 and you haven't registered to vote yet, you still have time to do that and then to involve yourself in this election. As we've talked about all along, this is probably one of the most important, probably the easiest, but certainly not in the totality of empowerment in terms of controlling and steering your government, the biggest step that you should take as you stay on top of those elected officials. But getting them into office, choosing the people to represent you, who represent your interests, then push government ideologically in the direction that favors what you believe to be in the best interest of you, your family, your neighborhood, your community, right? Your state, your country, and the planet. If we go that route, who best to serve your interest and to identify those problems in the legislative process, right? The problems, and then come up with those solutions, formulate and then come up with those solutions to then be implemented. We have an executive at the top of the ticket today, right? The President of the United States is up for election. We'll decide that tomorrow. Probably won't have the results right away. It's probably going to take a little bit. Some of these polls show some very, very, very close races in the Electoral College of 270 votes, which will actually be voted on and carried out in December, as we've discussed. But you and I will choose our electors for president tomorrow. And once those electors have been chosen, it's pretty much a done deal as to who they're ultimately going to vote for. But all of those other races beyond the president, all right, are also on the ballot as well. Your state representatives, a number of local candidates, county commissioners, township trustees, supervisors, clerks, treasurers. There's a number of different individuals on your ballot. Sheriffs, other countywide elected officials, the drain commissioner, if that's something that floats your boat and interests you, and it really should actually. They're fairly powerful individuals when it comes to building permits and growth in your community. So at any rate, I have a lot of students who aren't exactly sure what's on their ballot, and it's not a bad idea that before you get your ballot, you maybe take a look to see what's on the ballot. And there's a process for that. You can go, and I know we don't have the ability to flip screens here with YouTube and its limited resources. You'd think they'd be on top of all of it, but short of trying to put some, second party software on the college's computer system, which they do not care for us to do, I got to kind of do this a little bit old school. Old school includes having you take a look at the screen over here. And in order to do that, I got to kind of move my filming system around here. But once we do that, then I'm going to show you how to go to the Secretary of State's website and then find your particular ballot. So let's do that real quick. Look at that. High tech. Sorry about that. All right. So, COVID capers. Okay, so there's our big screen, which we would have had in class. This is the Secretary of State's website. I'm going to keep it here for just a second, but show you how to get here. If you just open any new tab, and this, remember, let me see if I can get to the top here so you can at least see the addresses as it goes. Oh, something like that. There we go. So if we go to www mi.gov, right, /SOS for Secretary of State. Boom, hit the enter there. This will take you to the Secretary of State's main page, which includes where we get our driver's license. And by the way, if you haven't updated your license plate because the Secretary of State's offices have been closed or you need tabs, get on that. They're actually writing tickets for those now, much to my wife's chagrin. Not her fault. We never got a notice from the Secretary of State that that it indicated the return, the price, the fee, and everything that we're used to. But ignorance is no excuse, as they say, and so we took care of that online. But having said that, fair warning: if your tabs aren't up to date, get on that because they are ticketing for that. But if you go over here to the far left, you see elections. Click on elections. All right, and then this will take you down, and then click on this Tuesday, November 3rd election. And that takes you to the site I was just on. I guess I can continue on through here. But little note from our Secretary of State here, and then a whole lot of information that may be of interest to you. What you're looking for here, see, it says personalized voting information, right? Personalized voting information. And then from this personalized voting information, if you see this says view your sample ballot for the upcoming election, your sample ballot, and then, right, you got to put in some voters information, right? Here's where you can find your clerk's office, for example. We just had that conversation about registering to vote. Am I registered? You could actually get a ballot saying at the clerk's office today and then drop it in. Just give it to them and avoid the lines tomorrow if that's what you want to do. Right. Here's the process for registering to vote. Right. Here's, again, finding where, if you want to vote in person, how do you find your voting polling place? Right. And again, so what's on the ballot is the box that you're going to click. So, and under your voting information, again, what's on the ballot, you're going to click that. And this is where you can get that information by jurisdiction and precinct. You need to know a little bit about where you're registered. And if you know that, you'll be able to breeze through this. So this is the upcoming election. I'm going to put my information in. Right, I'm over in Jackson County. Right, just a county over. And I live in Jackson City, and my precinct is Ward 6, Precinct 1. So then if I click View the Ballot, it'll give me what I have to look at in terms of the different candidates. I don't know why there are dollar signs here. That's a little silly to me. But I guess that's you can take a look at, see who, if you're doing a little research ahead of time, I guess take a look at, see who may have been contributing cash to these candidates. It's a little weird. I hadn't seen that before, but okay. Must be filing information. So again, if we take a look over here at the left-hand side, at the top of the ticket, remember, these are the electors of the president. Remember that, right? When you're voting for the electors of the president and vice president, you may see the name of the individual, but you're actually voting for the party of electors. 16 electors in Michigan, as we've discussed, and you're taking a look and choosing which of these individuals are that you want or you believe is going to be best to lead the state over the next 4 years, to lead this country over the next 4 years. Then you have we have a United States Senate race, right? There's just one. Remember that Senate races are tiered. Each state has 2 U.S. senators, and they serve 6 years, and so it's one senator, skip an election, then one senator, right? 2 years later, another senator, skip an election, one senator. Right? That's how they go. That's your 6 years. Then I'm over in District 7. You guys are District 3 if you live in, Berry County or Calhoun County, where most of our district is. And then, but if you live in Branch County, you too are also in District 7. And so these are the only 2 candidates. There's no third-party candidates running. So you have Gretchen Driscoll and Tim Wahlberg. And then for me, again, I know over here we've got Matt Hall, for example, and Hodsma. They're the incumbents, and they have challengers. So your ballot will look a little bit different. When it comes to the state boards, we all live in the same state. So Board of Education, very important. Nobody pays attention to it, but it's very important who serves on the State Board of Education. Though I will say our Michigan State Legislature and our governor have done more to really guide education than our State Board of Education has been doing over the last number of years. University of Michigan, again, these are all just Board of Regents, the governors of Wayne State, the State Board of Michigan State University, Board of Trustees. These are individuals who are looking to lead these universities. They have a big hand in what your tuition rates are. So if you're looking to go to Wayne State, University of Michigan, Michigan State University, these individuals will ultimately determine any type of tuition raises, tuition increases. Ultimately, the rules for most of the day-to-day goes through the president, but this is the group of publicly elected representatives of the state who then guide the presidents of those institutions. Then you've got, for us over there as a prosecuting attorney, there is no challenger for our guy. Yours may be different. Clerk's deed commissioners. So this is all, again, all right. And then oftentimes you can vote straight party. You can just simply vote Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or U.S. Tax Party, and that'll cover all of these individuals that have an R or D next to their name, or Green Party, Natural Law, any of that, right? It does not cover judges, right? Judges are nonpartisan. And even though your state Supreme Court, these individuals will actually be nominated by their parties or run as independents. They are nonpartisan, right? So currently Bridget McCormick is a current justice on the Supreme Court. So she carries that title and that'll show up. But each of these other individuals, you're voting for two, each of these other individuals, they are all will be new to the bench. All right. So they are non-incumbents. All right. And same thing here with Michael Clarion over in my district. He's currently a judge. So is John McBain, currently a judge, right? James Robert Redford is currently a judge. And so many of these individuals are running unopposed, but where you do have opposition, right, you'll have to vote for those individuals and then choose them. The other thing is we have some state proposals, right? So there's a constitutional amendment about the state's parks endowment. And again, this is all statewide. There's a proposed constitutional amendment that prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures of a person's electronic data and electronic communications, right? And then for us in Jackson, there are specific charter amendments that we're being asked to vote on. All right, and you should take a look at those and see if they are something that you would have interest in. I'm going to back it up here just a second and just kind of put in a random Battle Creek. We'll say Battle Creek. So I'll go to Calhoun County, and I'm just going to put in a random. This won't be my specific ballot, but this may be yours if we go to Battle Creek City, and it doesn't really matter which precinct 3-1. Well, it will, because this, I don't think we have any local candidates running right now for local. So this is the typical Calhoun County ballot. Again, electors for the president, United States Senator, right? That's been the same. Now over here, again, a different representative. We know that ultimately the Libertarian, he's changed his party affiliation, oh shoot, I'm blanking on the name. But the replacement of our current congressman over here in this area is headed up by these two individuals, just the Democrat and the Republican. And again, no third party candidates got on the ballot to run. So Peter Meyer and Hillary Schulten, this is who would be representing the Battle Creek, Calhoun County, Berry County area. All right, and as we pointed out in the city, Jim Hodgman and Dave Morgan, and you know this because each of you did your own Who Represents Me, so you know who represents you for those of you who completed it properly, right? You got the points. And so then again, your State Board of Education, this is all going to be the same. These are for statewide. Your county commissioner then in this area, it doesn't indicate who the incumbent is, but oh yeah, it does. Well, I don't know if that's, yeah, it does, right? So Jake Smith is the incumbent, and you can see that I think I was just trying to figure out if incumbents are actually in bold or not. It's hard to say, but at any rate, you should get to know who your incumbents are and who's running against them. For potential for change. All right, Water Resources Commissioner. You don't call it Drain Commissioner over here. Then over here, these are your judges. Looks like a lot of the judges are right? There's no opposition, so they're shoo-ins. They're already basically elected. And then, hey, there's a Kellogg Community College race for the College Board of Trustees. Vote for not more than 3. Some fine candidates there. Take a look at those individuals. Try to do a little background research on them. Best for me to just simply stay out of this, since these individuals are ultimately my bosses. They're the bosses of my bosses of my bosses, so to speak, right? They're the connection from the community, your community, to Kellogg Community College. They have a big say in tuition rates and decisions regarding COVID and face-to-face classes and the whole 9 yards. So, for us, for you watching, this is a fairly important race. So you might want to take a look at that. And then again, right through, you do have local elections, at least for the mayor. For the first time, I think you're electing the mayor separately. The mayor used to be elected as an individual, one of the commissioners elected, city commissioners elected, would then be chosen by the whole of the city commission, and they would actually choose from within who would be the mayor. For the first time, you're actually doing a publicly elected or elected via popular vote of your mayor. All right. And then you've got the same state proposals, constitutional amendments, and then it looks like you have a city proposal, or at least a county proposal for 911 surcharge. All right, so this would be an extra amount of monies that would go on your, typically your phone bill, which either your online phone bill, or a cellular phone bill, or if you have a landline, and then this would go to support the 911 system. So when you're making a call in emergency, somebody's on the other end and can get help to you quickly. So again, this is a typical ballot for someone who lives in the city of Battle Creek, specific to Ward 3, Precinct 1. But you can see, again, that these are the individuals who are going to be on your ballot. So again, how to get there? All right, let's just start it from the beginning. For all of you, you got a good solid day to take a look at this and then vote tomorrow, or you could even get it done and vote today if you go to your local clerk's office. But www.mi.gov/SOS. Boom. That's your Secretary of State. Over here on the left-hand side, elections. All right, click on that. You'll see Tuesday, Election Day. Okay, Jocelyn Benson. And then it was what was it? Did I skip it? There it is. Personalized voting information. All right. And then from the personalized voting information, view your sample ballot. Okay. And then again, up here towards the top, what is on the ballot, right? And then you can go and put your specific information in. And again, you're going to want to know what your precinct is. And we had to do that for the county. At least you know who your county commissioner is. but you may not know exactly what your jurisdiction and precinct is, the township, and then which precinct you live in. And oftentimes that can be found on your registration. If you go and trying to find a polling place, where's my polling place? When you put your information in, oftentimes your polling place will come up based upon your address, and that'll give you that information you need to know about which precinct you're in, and not only where you go to vote, but what your specific ballot may look like. Right? All right. By the way, it just came to me. He just came to me. Justin Amash, right? We know that Justin Amash is currently the congressman of the 3rd District, and he'll be the congressman up through January, but he's not running for re-election. Really, Justin Amash has really never cared for the president of the United States ultimately, and had really never been a strong Republican per se in terms of following the Republican platform and being supportive of the party's decisions as they went forward. So he was always kind of an outlier in terms of the Republican Party, more of a libertarian, as he freely admitted. And as such, I think he was really embraced by a lot of individuals because he did take that position more often than not, that, look, this isn't what the Constitution was designed to allow Congress and the executive branch to do, so I'm not going to support it. And I think a lot of individuals appreciated that independent streak. But once we get around to an election where it's partisan, right? Republicans supporting Republicans, Republicans supporting the top of the ticket, regardless of disagreements, recognizing that the other alternative is antithetical to the party's interest, right? Democrats elected into those offices are not going to push Republican platform planks. And so you either got to toe the line or you got to get out. And I think Justin Amash recognized that and chose not to run again. There was some talk of him choosing to run as a libertarian in the district. Really tough to do. We had that conversation, potentially even running as the libertarian candidate for president. But again, that just wasn't his interest. And so he has bowed out of running altogether, which of course creates an opening for 2 non-incumbents. And there will be some change in the 3rd District. So that I wanted to bring your attention to. All right. And again, if you have any questions, you can certainly fire me an email about where to find this information, how to get back here. I may drop a link on our website too, just to make it a little bit easier. But these are websites that we should all be familiar with anyhow. All right. So not going to spend a lot more time today on lecture, but I do want to take us into the Constitution, which, let's just kind of finish it up. Article 6 of the Constitution, Article 7, as important as any of the articles, aren't very long. They aren't very long and they aren't very verbose. And so there's not a lot of controlling information other than in Article 6 of the Constitution, there's a pretty important phrase in the context of the Supremacy Clause, pretty important piece of the Constitution in the form of what we call the Supremacy Clause. And in a nutshell, the Supremacy Clause really is just a function, a function of a two-party contract, right? It's a recognition within the language, right, enumerated that this language, this Constitution supersedes, right, those other agreements, the Articles of Confederation, for example, in the Constitution supersedes those other agreements and is the supreme law of the land, right? And if you use your text, pull up Article 6 in your text, you can pull it up from online, and then of course you've got all the background information for from our in terms of essays from our authors. But I'm just going to take you back here again to the Avalon Project. If you just simply go to Google or whatever your preferred search engine is, the fact that we call search engines Google is probably the reason there's an antitrust there's antitrust movements against Google. They've got too much power in the field. But regardless, if we simply keyword Avalon and Yale, and that'll take us to the Avalon Project. And if we go to 18th century documents, that'll include the Constitution and the amendments and a lot of other great information. But if we go to the Constitution of the United States, we know that Article 6, right? Not very long. Look at that, 3 parts to Article 6, right? All debts contracted, engaged, or entered into before the adoption of this Constitution shall be as valid against the United States under this Constitution as under the Confederation, right? So debts would still be paid. Monies owed to individuals, particularly for the American Revolution, there would still be an obligation to pay those monies. Number 2, the Constitution and the laws of the United States, which shall be made in pursuant thereof, and all treaties made or which shall be made under the authority of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land, right? And the judges in every state, right? So state judges in every state shall be bound thereby. Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state, right? Anything in the Constitution or laws of any state to the contrary, notwithstanding, right? So there were still state rights, state power, state laws that protected the states from from treaties that may have been entered into that would allow the states to not necessarily have to comply. Now, each of the states that came in after this Constitution was ratified had a different standing. Michigan, for example, came in after the Constitution was ratified as a product of this new Constitution and how states are admitted. But the states that were already in place, again, as this new Constitution was ratified and the federal government, the national government began to operate, there may have been, or there might have been, areas where there was conflict, and in those areas, there would have to be a reconciliation. Otherwise, look, you defer to the Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. And then lastly, 3, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath of affirmation to support this Constitution, right? But no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any public office of trust under the United States. No religious test, right? So this idea that you can't be Jewish and be on the Supreme Court, or more recently, that there's a problem with somebody who's Catholic being on the Supreme Court, that doesn't fly. There is no religious test, not as a requirement or qualification to any office of public trust under the United States, right? This idea to support this Constitution, this is kind of interesting because this is where we get into, when we get to the Civil War, the argument that the states seceding from the Union, declaring the Constitution null and void, certainly we're not supporting the Constitution. On the flip side, the Constitution, as the Southern states would have argued, was not living up to the promise that the Constitution was supposed to live up to. And as such, the contract itself was null and void, right? If one party is not living up to the expectation as agreed to, right, why is it that the other party has to continue to play their part? That at least was the argument. So you had this disagreement over, was the Constitution being adhered to by the North over the issue certainly of slavery, and whether or not the South had to comply, or did the South actually have a true argument that they were being aggrieved in this current relationship, and the Constitution was not being followed, and as such, it was their right to break off that contractual obligation found in the Constitution. So we have the Supremacy Clause in Article 6, right? The Supremacy Clause in Article 6, no religious test in Article 6, and this idea that individuals, all judicial officers, all executive legislative officers shall swear an oath of affirmation to the support of this Constitution. So the next or the last article of the Constitution, Article 7, not a very long document, Article 7 is really the ratification. And this, if we think about how this Constitution, this contract is structured, it should make sense, right? First, the first 3 articles follow the 5 steps of the policy process, right? gives us the building, formulating, adopting, the implementing and evaluating, tells us who, where they come from, gives us some scope as to what they can do, gives us the power of the executive, whether it's the power that comes with being in control of the military, or the power to execute or be the top of the bureaucracy. So we got, and then the judicial branch, the referees, which should be, again, dealing with these other two branches and ensuring that what was decided upon as on behalf of the people as a role of the government is actually being carried out properly. And of course, we also give this judicial branch the power to determine constitutionality of these acts, right? Is it constitutional? So then that's Articles 1, 2, and 3. Article 4 then gets us into the states, right? The other player, what the states have to give up, what they're going to get in return. The majority of the things that the states already do, they assume they're going to continue to simply do them. But to put that in writing, we get a 9th and 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Then we get Article 5 of the Constitution, which gives us a process for amending the Constitution. I mean, that's the big piece in Article 5. So we have the structure, we have what it's going to do, we have the two players, right? The national government and the states. And then we get to Article 5, and Article 5 is, okay, you don't like this contract, you don't like this relationship between these two parties. How do we change it? Article 5 gives us the process for changing it. Then, recognizing how we can change this, then we go to Article 6, but then recognizes that those things in the Constitution then are the supreme law of the land, right? Once this is ratified, Article 7, this is the supreme law of the land. And so then Article 7, the last step in the process, is to make it legal, right? To adopt it. And the process for adopting it, of course, goes out to the states. The states are the entity that are actually going to create this national government. The national government does not exist, right? Yes, there's a national Congress and the Articles of Confederation, but the national government, as it is, with power, the power to tax, the military power, those things listed in the Constitution, it does not exist. The states have to create it. And in order for the states to create it, they have to agree that this relationship between the states, relationship between the national government and the states, that this is okay, right? And that ratifying process then takes place over the next couple of really months, years, if you want to include Rhode Island in that process. And Article 7 outlines that process. All right, so Article 7, you can just click to the next here. See this, Article 7. It too is not long. Right? This is Article 7. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states, so ratifying the same. All right, so ratifying the same. So this is kind of an interesting, also, if you take a look at the essays that are in your textbook that talk about Article 7, there's a couple of issues going on here with Article 7 and the ratification of the Constitution. One, under the Articles of Confederation, changes to the Articles of Confederation had to be unanimous, right? So this whole, the idea that this is not the Articles of Confederation anymore, even though a lot of what is in the Articles of Confederation is found in this Constitution. The idea that we are the United States, right? That under the style of the Articles of Confederation, that's what we were considered then under the Articles. So under this Constitution, we would still be the United States. But regardless, the problem here is that not all the states were in agreement to get rid of the Articles of Confederation. One in particular, Rhode Island, sent no delegates. So of the 13 original colonies, now states, because of the revolution and independence, separate sovereign countries, if you will, Rhode Island sends nobody. Rhode Island had made peace during this time of Sheas Rebellion leading up to this constitutional convention. They used paper money to get out from under the debt, and ultimately favored the farmers and the debtors through government, whereas more often you had the other states favoring the merchant class and the payment of debts owed to them. But so Rhode Island had no interest in muddling around with the idea of losing the sovereignty that they already had. right? So tiny little Rhode Island. They, I think, saw maybe the writing on the wall that this was not going to be in their best interest as a sovereign country, if you will, and elected to send no delegates for even the discussion of changing the Articles of Confederation, let alone creating a new constitution. So you don't have 13 of the 13 states in place at the time that this document is put together, negotiated. Recognizing that, then it wouldn't make sense to say, okay, there has to be unanimity of the states ratifying it for it to become the law of the land. So 9 being necessary. Interesting, though, if the other states didn't ratify this Constitution, would they automatically be put in the United States, right? Automatically, or would it only apply to the 9 states that actually agreed to it? And based upon the language, in my opinion, it appears that only the states that actually ratify the Constitution would be a part of this new agreement. Again, there's a problem. Under the Articles of Confederation, those states are also a part of the agreement with the other, say, 3 states that decide not to ratify this Constitution. So it really did create a bit of a conundrum, and Rhode Island held out for quite some time before they ultimately ratified the Constitution. But eventually, even Rhode Island comes around and ratifies the Constitution. The federal government is already operating. Washington is already president, and finally, the ratifying committee of the state of Rhode Island votes to adopt the Constitution and to become part of this. These new United States, if you will. So all 13 states are eventually adopted into or adopt this contract as their own. Now, as I said earlier, as we said very early on, a couple of things. McCulloch versus Maryland gives us this idea of the necessary and proper clause in effect, but based upon the Federalist Papers, based upon going and digging a little deeper to drive some context to the content of the Constitution, the 9th and the 10th Amendment, particularly the 10th Amendment, really is meant to counter what some states, those states most cautious, see as a catch-22, a poison pill, a snake in the grass of the the necessary and proper clause, elastic clause that comes in at Article 1, Section 8. At its very tail end. And that basically says, and Congress can do whatever Congress needs to do to carry out the powers that are in this Constitution as federal powers. Now, that's a little bit broad. It's too broad. The idea of elastic is that it stretches the Constitution. Now, it doesn't say this is the elastic clause, but it's referred to as the elastic clause or the necessary and proper clause. That is the reason for the 10th Amendment, the amendment to the Constitution, which it says, and the concern of the states is that those things not in this Constitution shall be left to the states to decide, right? And if there's a question about that, there's a process for that. If we want to ensure the federal government has that authority and power, Article 5, right? Well, it's cumbersome, and the ability to get so many states but for the states, that's okay, right? The states are, before the Constitution's ratification, separate sovereign countries. They have all the tools and all the power of a country. And if this national government needs more power and it's in the best interest of the state, then the states would get together and go through the amendment process to give the federal government that authority. Not very nimble, right? Government works a little bit better when it doesn't have such regulation on it. When I say works better, I mean works faster. But to the state's interest, a fast-working national government may not be in its interest, and the ability to pull that government back, to hold it, to rein it in, is why we have that 10th Amendment. 10th Amendment is counter to the idea of the necessary and proper clause. And, by the way, it comes after as a condition of ratification. Many of the states, we would not have gotten to 9 states ratifying the Constitution without the ratifying conditions. The conditions we find in the Bill of Rights, the Bill of Limits, that are placed upon this national government to protect the states from really sliding into a relationship like they had with England that led to the American Revolution. Sheas Rebellion helps to goad those individuals who are the merchant class, the capitalistic class, the classes that are seeing they're getting pressured from overseas, the captive market of England, and that pressure is extending then into the inner lands, into the poorer communities, the farming communities, where individuals who may have given up on tending their fields to fight the American Revolution don't have the monies to pay their debts that they had incurred during the American Revolution. Now their farms are being foreclosed upon. That leads to Sheas Rebellion, a rebellion against this forced payment of the debts owed. Right? That's a tough one. But that rebellion itself, which shakes and scares, right, the merchant classes, the elite classes, pushes this need for strengthening the central government, particularly in terms of military matters, taxing matters, the insurance of that debts will be paid. Those things, those are their main concerns. But when it comes back out to the states for ratification, that's not the concern of each of the states. The concern of the majority of individuals in the states beyond the merchant class is that we're going to create a new unitary system of government, a new central authority, and we're going to find ourselves right back in an American revolution if that central authority becomes too powerful, too strong, and puts us in a position of where we don't feel that we're getting proper representation or taken care of. That's kind of the Civil War, right? A central government that's making decisions to the disinterest of the states, and the southern states simply saying, we're out of here. Yes, it's over the issue of slavery, and yes, the issue of slavery is heinous and worth fighting against. But the point being, the central government becomes too strong or is perceived to become too strong to the detriment of the states. States are out of there. All right. So the ratification of the Constitution, recognizing that, the Bill of Rights really becomes it's not an afterthought. It's not a hey, we've been doing this for a couple of years. Maybe we should put you're not going to have a constitution. We're not going to agree to this constitution unless these things are part of the Constitution. And eventually the Federalists, those individuals pushing for the passage of the Constitution, agree that there would be a Bill of Rights added and that these concerns would be incorporated into that Bill of Rights. And true to their word, they actually do pass the Bill of Rights a few years after the Constitution is ratified. Any rate, that's how ratification ultimately comes around. We finally get to the 9 states, and then eventually the last of the 3 states, or 4 states, I should say, including Rhode Island, all jump on board, and the full of the country is a part of this constitutional contract. I'm just going to take you real quick, and we'll call it a day. Back here to the Avalon Project, back here to our weird way of showing our screen. But if we go to the Bill of Rights, Bill of Limits, right, here they are. It's not really 10. I know it says 10. It's not really 10, actually. It was multiple concepts. In the First Amendment, right, you've got Congress shall make no law, limit, make no law, religion, right, speech, press, assembly, petitioning the government for redress and grievances, which was, again, all about Sheas Rebellion. Article 2, not just one concept. You've got the idea of what is a militia, right? State, local militia, necessary to the security of a free state, right? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So does this mean that it was all in the context of militia? No. The idea that militias are made up of individuals and that those individuals must be allowed to keep their guns, that's only part of it, right? The people to keep and bear arms. It doesn't say the militia, or it doesn't stop right here about regulating a militia and determining the militias will have arms or not. It indicates the people. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. For this reason, as far as the national government is concerned and the freedom of the states, again, think American Revolution. This is why we have the Second Amendment in the national contract. But as far as individuals, the ability to keep and bear arms, it goes well beyond just simply the militia. It includes defending oneself, defending one's home, defending themselves against, you had at the exterior, you had oftentimes fight with the indigenous peoples. You had animals, not only for protection and security. You had, not every individual was a wholesome individual, so you had ne'er thee wells that you would have to defend yourself from. I mean, there are a number of reasons to keep and bear arms beyond the militia, but as far as the context goes for keeping us from going into the American Revolution or putting the states at a disadvantage to the national government, that's why we have this right to keep and bear arms. And the national government shall not, the national government shall not deny the individual the right to keep and bear arms. Now, we're going to talk about something later on about what we call selective incorporation and how the Bill of Rights, 14th Amendment, helps us a bit, but how the Bill of Rights ultimately become protections against government, any government, infringing upon these rights. It takes a while to get the Second Amendment included in that, but amendments regarding your right to free speech, your right to assemble, for example, those are early on incorporated into this idea that no government can abridge these rights, right? Not just the national government, which this is directed at the national government. This is what we're talking about, limiting the national government. The states already have their own constitutions. Michigan, which obviously comes after the ratification of the Constitution, has its own constitution. Right. And so if you want to look at where the state constitution, where the state stands on the issue of defending yourself, Section 6 of Article 1, right, individual rights, Article 1 for our Constitution, our state constitution, Section 6 outlines the right of the people to keep and bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state. So each state has its own constitution, its own protections. But through the 14th Amendment, through centralizing of authority after the Civil War, the incorporation of these ideas of government and government limits are then extended down to all governments. And of course, the U.S. Supreme Court ultimately makes these distinctions and decisions when it comes to the interpretation of what the Constitution means, right? So these are the different amendments. Now, to the degree that the different states, right, had a hand in crafting these amendments as a condition. If we go down to the constitutions of the different states, you see that they already had their own constitutions in place. They were already operating. Those didn't go away. Okay. And then we have down here, to keep going further, you get into the ratification of the U.S. Constitution by the states, right? So we know that Delaware was first, right? And then ultimately New Hampshire becomes the 9th. So those states that come after New Hampshire, for example, right? Let's take a look at New York. New York had a lot of conditions. They didn't just simply want to pass the Constitution as is. In fact, the Federalist Papers were really written to sway the New York delegation to support this new Constitution. In fact, if you read the Federalist Papers, they start out as being written to the delegation of New York, right? We can find it, the Federalist Papers. Right, so number one, so to the people of the state of New York, that's who the Federalist Papers were directed to in this ratification. And then they sent to answer these questions that have been raised by other delegations, ratifying delegations, right, to dissuade them from voting no on the adoption of the U.S. Constitution. Right. The first state, Delaware, they looked at it, they said, hey, this looks pretty good. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go jump on board. See that? Yep, we looked at it, looks good, we're on board. Other states, Massachusetts, remember Massachusetts, that kind of at the heart of the American Revolution, they have some concerns. First, that it be explicitly declared that all powers not expressly delegated by the aforesaid Constitution are reserved to the several states to be their exercise, right? That's the 10th Amendment. That is the first concern of Massachusetts in their support of this Constitution. So you have the enumerated necessary and proper clause in the Constitution. This is the amendment that addresses that. And they're not the only one. All right. So again, gotta love that Avalon project. That's a great website to go and just kind of get some context to the content. The resources in your text, the essays in your text that go out along with each of those different articles, the clauses within those articles, and then when we get to the amendments, the clauses with those amendments also give some great background and understanding as to why those additions were made, why that verbiage was used in the Constitution. And so from the originalist point of view, that we have a good understanding of what the intent was so that we are in firm ground, firm standing when we evoke our constitutional rights, when we point to the Constitution and point to the government, to the state and say, I don't think you can do this. And here's why. Now, again, you got to get the courts to agree with you, right, in that whole process. But if you have a firm understanding of your Constitution, then you're in a pretty good position of power, right? The Constitution was written as a document to limit, when you get to the Bill of Rights, to limit the power of the federal government, to contain it to those things that the federal government can do, and ultimately to limit the states to some degree, and then offer powers and control the states. And then for the states themselves, you got to look at their own state constitutions. And the state constitutions often will have verbiage that recognizes that all power emanates from the people, and that the people have rights, and that the government is to be limited and controlled within those rights. And when you know that, when you have that information, you recognize that information, you can be much more comfortable and confident in your ability to go out without fear of your government, without fear of some reprisal from your government. It doesn't mean you're not going to screw up from time to time. It doesn't mean you're going to be on the wrong end from time to time. But at the end of the day, knowing your rights as a citizen, knowing your powers as a citizen, it's a good thing to have, right? It's a powerful thing to have, and that's for anybody: black, white, rich, poor, right? Business owner, hand worker in the field. Everybody can benefit from knowing their Constitution. All right, you guys, as we talked about, you have the opportunity to go and get registered to vote. If you're not already registered to vote, if you are, get to know your ballot a little bit. Take the opportunity to know where you're voting, whom you're voting for on those different issues. So when you actually do get the ballot, you're not stuck there trying to read over and trying to remember those names. Do I want this guy? Do I not want this guy? In a pinch, think of your ideology, left and right, Republicans on the right, Democrats on the left. In a pinch, where are you? Know yourself. Are you on the right? Are you on the left? If you're on the right, vote right. If you're on the left, vote left. If you don't know the candidates. If you know the candidates, and you're like, well, I know this individual. It's a great person, next door neighbor, right? I like this person. I know that if I talk to them and said, I have a problem, and this is something I'd like you to look at, they're going to look at it, right? They're going to take a look at it. Maybe you don't know the individuals, you're not 100% sure, then vote your ideology. It's the best you got. All right, we'll see you guys later. I'll see you on Wednesday. I don't think we're going to know Wednesday. We might, but I don't think we're going to know. We'll know some things, but we may not know who the President of the United States is yet. All right, have a good one, you guys.